Hey there, everybody. It's Marty Walzer coming to you from the Owlbear lair, Raging Owlbear on social media. That's me. And it's been a while since I've had another video because, life is hard. And sometimes things get in the way. Owning a home, having children. Yeah, I did all those things actually between the last video and now. Bought a house, got a wife, had some children. And now everything's really busy. No, seriously, it's been a couple weeks, and I wanted to get this done about once a week, but it just can't happen unless I am able to devote more time to it. That's all right. You don't need to know all that stuff. I'm glad you're here because I've got another, I think, pretty good episode to talk about. Storm King Thunder, running Storm King Thunder. That's why we're here. So first half, I'm going to talk about some more generic stuff, handling humor in your game, both in-game and at the table, out of the game. Talk a little bit about mass combat. And there was related to that topic, there was this really big Kickstarter you might have heard of. And then talk a little bit about what my characters have gotten into since Tribor. A couple episodes ago, I talked to what they did in Tribor and what they did a little bit after Tribor, and then and now they're assaulting Grudd Haug, and I'm gonna talk about that bridge between Tribor and Grudd Haug and some of the things I did and some of the things I wish I did or whatnot. So let's get into it. Sorry, I'm already doing this late at night again. It's 3 hairs past a freckle. And any minute now, my wife's going to call me and be like, why aren't you in bed? Because that's what she does sometimes. Why aren't you in bed? And I go, I don't know. Because I'm talking to you guys in the middle of the night. Well, not quite the middle of the night yet. Almost. Topic 1, humor. A post on social media, actually, by one of my Facebook friends. Well, by somebody who I've talked to on social media only. I don't know them personally, but we've shared conversations, and we have similar viewpoints about D&D and how it plays. And they posted on social media about being in a game or being in has D&D turned into comedy. In the sense of he wants a game where tension builds and there's maybe some serious role playing and you ramp up the emotional investment. But his players, or I don't know if he's the DM in this particular instance or just one of the players at the table, but the players are cracking jokes and being goofy and kind of playing the game for laughs at times when he feels like there maybe should be more tension. And it was the question kind of out to the social media in general was, what do I do about this? How do we build tension, stuff like that. So there's a couple ways to answer this, depending upon what the actual issue is at the table. I talked about session 0 in a previous episode where you want to, if you're the DM, talk to your players about the style of game that they want to play and that you want to play. And you say, this is what I'd like to do. And this is kind of how I imagine the campaign being from a tone perspective. Is it gritty? Is it high fantasy? Is it light? Is it just beer and pretzels? Is it dungeon crawl? Is it hard RP? And the players are doing the same thing. Well, they're like, well, can I like this aspect and that aspect, but can we also do this? Blah, blah, blah. So in the session 0, you want to kind of set that baseline of, and humor comes into that. Is this a serious game? Is this going to have some heavy theme to it, heavy tone to it? Is it if it's a horror-based campaign, like Call of Cthulhu or Curse of Strahd, or, obviously that tone is very important to capturing the fun in play, because that tone is required for those games. Or, not that there can't be some humor, but the point is that the overall tone of the campaign is more serious, is more tense. Everybody's going to go crazy. Everybody's going to get killed. I don't know, but so a lot of sort of joke cracking at the table can really break people's immersion. And the same is true for D&D. If there's a lot of joking around at the table, that can really take you out of the moment, especially if it is a tense scene. Or as the DM, you're trying to build a tense scene, and then there's jokesters at the table, and they're throwing you off that game. They're just so. There's a couple things you can do about that. If the players actually are really being disruptive, the best thing to do is have that out of game conversation, and just say, hey, I know you guys want to blow off steam, and that's cool. But there are certain times at the table that I'm trying to build an experience. Can we tone down the slapstick in those moments? Can you kind of key into my emotional investment into that scene? And if I'm playing it light, then you guys can play it light. But if I'm trying to get tonally serious, can you buy into that? Talk to them about that. Because that's in general, whenever there's an issue at the table, that's the best way to approach those types of problems is to just say, hey, I don't want to ruin your fun, but there's also, you have to give back to me a little bit, and can we do this or that? And that usually will be fine, especially if you say, hey, I really want to set this tone to the game overall. I don't mind you guys joking around, and especially when there's a moment that you feel like, oh, there needs to be a little, but try not to be the class clown all the time. The idea is you want to talk to all your players, because the converse to that is you may be wanting to set a specific tone to the game, but the rest of the players, they may all just be coming to D&D as a beer and pretzels game on a Friday night, and they're just trying to blow off steam. So that ties back into that sort of session zero conversation you have with them too, because, and again, session zero conversations can happen after the campaign's already started. You can have those talks about like, hey, I'm trying to set a serious tone, and you guys aren't really jiving into it. Do you want a serious tone, or do we want to just play really lightweight beer and pretzels D&D? And they may be like, you know what? At the end of the week, I just want to blow off steam and be silly and crack Python jokes. And that may be okay. In other words, you might have to bend your desire for a specific type of campaign if all the players are just like, you know what, we just kind of want to play light. Is that all right? Yeah. So there's a give and take. Most of the times your players will respect the tone that you're trying to set in your campaign. But, be cognizant of the fact that sometimes people just want to be silly on a Friday night. D&D is also about the socialization and being funny and stuff like that. So there's that side, and then there's also the guy who's the class clown and is a little disruptive. So the one side where everybody just wants to be relaxed and chill, you have to give that side to the players. Be like, all right, I understand. You may just not be into a heavy game at the moment. But on this side where there is one or two real jokesters, and some of the party does want a more serious, or at least a normally toned game, and these guys are always cracking jokes, that's the point where you can say, hey, pull them aside after a game and say, hey, look, I know you guys are just kind of fooling around and stuff, but can you guys just keep that to a minimum, especially if we're in a scene where all the other players are sort of invested into that level of intensity, and then you guys break a joke and kind of bust the fourth wall. So, again, talk to your players. Just be open about what you want out of the game. Let them be open about what they want out of the game. And yeah, sometimes you just have to talk to the guy who's the class clown and just be like, hey, could you just tone it down a notch? It's cool. I don't mind you breaking jokes. Sometimes, sometimes there's that guy who's just always disruptive. And you don't want to necessarily kick him out of the game. But if he's disruptive to the entire table, even if it's in a jokey way, but everybody's kind of like, it's really breaking the immersion for everybody else. Well, I don't ever want to say kick a guy out of the game. Because usually if you just talk to somebody, they'll understand and they'll meet you halfway. I've never had to boot somebody from the game for bad behavior. I've been very lucky. In the last several years, I've run several campaigns, probably in the last 10 years, and I've never really had to boot somebody out of the game. There might have been a time where I should have, but that's another story. Okay, so let's put a stop to that topic. 10 minutes. We got to keep this thing moving. I did want to say one other thing about disruptive players, though, and the humor at the table. I did have a situation in a game where a player left the game because of something I did not handle well. And so this is a lesson that you guys can learn from my mistakes. So I had one player who was playing a paladin and wanted to have some real serious role playing. I mean, not that he wanted to be like all hard RP, but he wanted to get into his character and talk to the NPCs and act in such a way that his character would and stuff like that. And then I had two other players who were kind of the jokesters of the group. And because this other player was kind of a new player to the game, we've been playing for a while, and then he came in. And these guys had their sort of banter that had been going on at the table for a while. And that's just what they did. So their at the table banter, which they were playing in character in a way, it was their characters bantering at each other, not necessarily the players, although it was half and half. You know how it is that people sometimes speak the humor through their character, but they're really speaking at the table. Well, they started kind of picking on his character in game through their characters. So it was this sort of passive aggressive humor that was happening at the table, and I kind of recognized it. But I thought essentially that the player would either handle it himself or was not that bothered by it. The problem was I let it go, even though I recognized that there was this sort of passive aggressive humor that was happening at the table. I let it go because I've been playing with some of these guys for a while. And one night, the player who was playing the paladin character got pretty pissed off. And I actually did talk to my players after that, but at that point it was too late. So, I actually did. I sent them an email and I'd be like, hey, things got really tense at the table, and I don't mind that you guys are joking around, but could you just lay off, the other player? Just stop making those kind of snipey remarks at him or at his PC. But the problem was that the damage had already been done. The other player eventually left the game within a few more sessions. And I was really bummed about this. I really liked that guy as a player. I thought he had a lot to contribute to the game, and I did not recognize how much it was bothering him right off the bat. Or when I did see it, I didn't stop it right away. And that's what I should have done. I should have put a stop to it immediately, possibly even at the table. I mean, how you handle those situations can be a little dicey, but I did go to those guys later and I said, you know, you guys basically chased him away. And I was a little disappointed about that. So that was a mistake on my part. Sometimes you have to recognize if there's an in-game tension that is occurring because of the humor. I mean, it was humorous. They weren't really being mean, ultra mean, but they were sniping, and it got on his nerves. And he said, you know what, I don't want to do that. My time constraints are too high for me to, he actually begged out of the campaign for a different reason, but I know he was saying that not to hurt my feelings. Because I screwed up. I recognized that it was on me that he quit the game. Because he wasn't having as much fun as he should have been. So learn from that. Recognize his mistakes. Oh, there is one other point. This is related as well. So there's the humor out of the game that your players are doing. And then there's also the humor in game that you might create that sometimes you have to be careful of, because you might, again, break the immersion in a way that you don't mean to. But at the same time, sometimes you want to be funny because it creates a moment in the game. So you do something meta. And as an example, in Storm King's Thunder, there is the ogress, the hill giantess, whose husband has left her. That the PCs meet or can meet. It depends on how your game runs, whether you do that little subplot or not. So I had my characters meet the giantess. And when they got to her lair, and again, I'm trying not to do anything too spoily for anybody who might be watching who's playing Storm King. But when they got to her lair, the book says, oh, the character's here, this giant crying and whatever, moaning or something like that. So I decided to have her singing a broken heart love song, basically, in giant. And funnily enough, two of my players did pick the giant language as one of their bonus language. I think they met it a little because they knew we were going to be doing a giant thing, but that's fine. So they picked giant as their bonus language. And so I decided the giantess was going to start singing, "Since my baby left me, I found a new place to dwell," et cetera, et cetera. And I made up a few giant-based lyrics to add into that song. For those of you who are very young, that's Elvis. To add to that Elvis song as a joke, I wrote like 2 stanzas of the giant singing Heartbreak Hotel in her very particular giant way. And it was good. It was a good moment. The players, laughed about it, and they, it created just a little, it did break the immersion slightly, but I thought it was worth it just to throw in a little fun fourth wall meta joke into the game. And it was 2 parts to it too, because they were on a warpath against hill giants. And the other reason I did it was to drive the story in a way that I didn't want them to go all murdery on her immediately, because they were looking for hill giants to kill, because they were looking for Grudd Haug at the time. So I wanted to, by creating that joke, not only did I add some levity into the game, I also set the tone for that scene to make them realize that it may not necessarily be a combat encounter. So it was a little bit of a cheat. I used that joke as a cheat, as a short circuit to let them know, there's something different about this encounter. It's not necessarily roll for initiative and let's fight. I want to try to have them talk to her and get the clues about Grudd Haug. And so they did. They didn't kill her. They were going to. They came really close to, but after a while, people they started talking about what they were going to do about the giant in the tower, and they realized, you know what? Let's talk to her. So it worked out. So let's talk about mass combat. I'm going to try to do a really short topic on mass combat because that first topic took too long already. So you might have heard a guy named Matt Colville who just made $2 million on Kickstarter. And he was, if you don't know, and maybe you do, but if you're a person who pays attention to D&D blogs, you probably know he was selling a book about like old school D&D, getting followers, building a stronghold, whether you're a fighter, you're building a fort or a wizard's tower or temple if you're a cleric. But in the old game, in AD&D and basic D&D from days of yore, back when we were youngins, after you got up to like 9th, 10th, whatever X level, your focus was not necessarily on adventuring, but on creating your little kingdom. So a lot of that has gone out of the game in the intervening years because the designers have realized the core focus has been being the heroes and running big quests and not necessarily doing the kingdom building part of the game. And so Matt Colville wrote a book on that, and he's also added some warfare rules to the book that he kickstarted. And granted, his Kickstarter was also about his streaming stuff and these dragon miniatures that he's trying to sell as well. So yeah, he made a crap load of money, which is pretty cool. Who'd have thunk somebody in this day and age could make a couple $1 million on a D&D based Kickstarter? Well, go figure. But I didn't actually back his book because I wasn't really sure I'd ever use the strongholds, followers type things. And then I didn't see his video about the mass combat sort of aspect of it till after the Kickstarter already closed. And I was like, oh, maybe that would have been kind of cool, actually. Because I've run a couple of mass combats very much in the way he talked about in his rule book and in the video where he explained the system was, because there have been other people that have put out sort of similar systems about the unit having a certain strength and certain hit points and stuff like that. And he has an interesting take on that, removing hit points from the game and using dice as a counter. And anyways, you can look at his video. He talks about the warfare. But the point of this thing about the mass warfare is the mass combat system is that not everybody, and he was taking the same idea for his, not all of your players are going to want to play a mass combat game where they control units and they move them around on the field and do blah, 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 blah. They may just want to play I'm the hero and I want to go fight things. And that is perfectly fine, because not everybody's into the warfare side of it. And so what Matt was saying, and what I've done also, is because this is an idea that's been out there, is that if you're doing a mass combat, you can do a lot of the mass combat off screen and just have your players have their involvement with the mass combat in an encounter. So you build an encounter that's about the players being in the battle, but they're not actually running the battle. All that stuff is happening kind of off screen. Sorry, 1 second. Checking the baby monitor. I guess I should say the toddler monitors because they're not babies anymore. Um, so I did the same type of thing. I ran Reavers of Harkenwald a couple years back, and I did a big combat with lots of minis on the map, stuff like that. But really what I tried to do is I focused in on the actions of the characters, had them do some stuff, and the rest of the battle was just, even though I had some representations of what was going on in the battlefield, I wasn't really running the battle as part of the encounter. I mean, it's not entirely true. It's hard to explain quickly in a video, but I focused on what the characters' actions were and what the outcome of those actions, how that affected the battle, and didn't necessarily worry so much about the battle itself, about running all the mechanics of the battle itself. That became more narrative and story. Because I basically said, in my mind, I said, here's how the battle's going to go. If the characters do well, this will be the outcome. If the characters do okay, this will be the outcome. And if the characters fail in their encounter, then this will be the outcome. So their specific encounter, the success of it or the failure of it, whatever the goal was for that particular part of the battle, that would affect the overall battle of their contribution either really swung the tide in favor of their side, or their failure to achieve the objective meant that the other side got the upper hand, or something along those lines. And so, I definitely recommend this approach, especially if you don't think your players want to do a big skirmish battle, with lots of units and stuff like that, because only certain types of players are going to be interested in that. The people who are into that sort of war gamey stuff or strategy board game stuff might love that aspect, but the people who are just playing D&D, well, you never know. It might be a nice change of pace. You could always ask them. You could say, hey, we're going to do this big battle. When you foreshadow what's going to happen, you can say, hey, we're going to do this big battle. Do you want to play out the battle, or you just want to play out your encounters and then have all that stuff happen off screen? Just ask your players. That's the best way to go about it. And so I did a combination of both. I had the players do their stuff, and I ran a little bit of the battle, like where they were. I ran the local part of the battle, but then there was other stuff that was happening off screen. And I recently did this again in Storm King's Thunder. As people, if you've watched any of the videos before, there's a adventure that I ran out of dungeon number 144. And I know you're probably sick to death of hearing about this adventure, but I loved it so much. And it was such a huge piece of the campaign that I absolutely recommend it. But in this particular adventure, they go up against lizardmen, and they go into the cave, the lair of the lizardmen and stuff like that. And they have to beat them up and stop kind of a ritual that's going on. But off stage from the adventure itself, there is an army gathering to attack the town that the heroes have come from. And in the adventure, they don't talk about that at all. Well, what they say is this battle is going to happen at the town, but we're not writing about this in this module, in this adventure. It's up to you, the DM, to decide, does that event occur? Does it not occur? Does the player's actions change what's going to happen? Or does that just happen off screen, et cetera, et cetera? So the idea is that the lizardmen, not only were they doing this ritual in their lair and stuff like that, but there was a group of them that were raising an army to invade this town nearby. And so what I had them do is I had them run the adventure, and then they found out about the army that was being raised. They had to rush back to town, and then I had them do like a skill challenge kind of thing, if you guys recall, for the edition, to prepare the town for the invasion. And then I set up a set piece encounter for their very small part of the battle. So I said the town has a what do you call it? A wooden palisade wall, but it wasn't complete in all the places. It had been damaged and stuff like that. So part of the skill challenge was to try to erect barriers and set up, barricades and whatnot to prep the town. but also they had to run a section of the wall. So that was the encounter I set up. Instead of running the whole mass combat, I said, this is your part. You have chosen to volunteer. I mean, that was part of their prep. I asked them what did they want to do as part of the setup, and then the next week we ran the combat. So we did all the prep in the previous session, and then I basically asked them how did they want to run the mass combat. I said, this invasion's coming. Do you want to do like where you guys control units and fight, or do you want to do individual encounters, stuff like that? I don't remember the exact conversation, but the point is that I ended up just deciding not to do like a mass combat, but just say they're going to be guarding this one particular gate in the wall, or this one barricaded part of the wall, set up their characters, and then have the horde start to come in, and then we just do a big fight. And it was fun. That actually worked out really well, because the other nice thing about doing a mass combat where the players are involved, you can also really ratchet up the difficulty without necessarily forcing a TPK, because they're going to have reserve units, or they're going to stuff like that. So depending upon how you want the narrative to go, this is a good way to create a lot of tension in the encounter, and players can go down to 0 hit points, and things can happen based upon the damage rolls at the table and the combat at the table. But the players are also not alone, so you can kind of, depending upon what they do, not rescue them. I don't want to make my world isn't safe for my players. I try not to get them out of a tight spot that they've gotten into, unless I can justify that that sort of DM fiat through the narrative of the story. So in other words, if they're getting themselves into a TPK situation, I'm not just going to save them out of DM fiat. But if I think there's a reason that the foes, the enemies, would take prisoners, and I talked about this in the Tribor encounter, if there's a reason they should take prisoners, if there's a reason that the end result isn't the entire party dying, I'm going to take that as a narrativist, and maybe I don't know if you want to call that railroading a little bit, or if you want to call that fudging, but I try not to save the players' bacon. And when people die, they're going to die. I mean, in the giant encounter, we had a guy dead because of massive damage. He was a wizard, and a giant threw a big old rock at him, and he took like 50 points of damage in a single shot, or something ridiculous. I mean, it was enough there was no death save. It was enough to take him down to negative hit points. And another PC had actually prepared for that situation. They had Revivify ready just in case. And so the other guy ran over and cast Revivify immediately and saved his bacon. But I could have easily had the giants immediately kill that guy too, or immediately attack that guy. Except that they were this is the encounter I talked about a couple episodes where they were surrendering. So they surrendered to the giants, and basically one of the players said, "Don't kill the hostages. You won't get what you want out of this," and it was a perfectly plausible explanation of why the giants wouldn't kill everybody, wouldn't kill the entire party, because again, the giants wanted something else out of the encounter, and so they used the party and the other civilians as hostages to get what they wanted. So from a story standpoint, it made perfect sense. I didn't have to do a TPK. The players surrendered and said, "We give up, but you can have the MacGuffin. You can win the encounter by getting what you want if you don't kill us." And that seemed like a perfectly reasonable way to go about it. You can listen to that story in the Tribor video I did a couple episodes ago. But getting back to the mass combat, my point is that with a mass combat, especially, you can do the same type of thing. When players go down, I mean, they're going to have to roll their death saves normally, obviously. And so people can still die. But if all the players happen to go down or something like that, and, you know, some of them stabilize or something like that, or there's other NPCs nearby that can help them stabilize, because the other NPCs know that, hey, these guys are heroes, and if we can help them, they're going to help us in return. You know, if we can get them back up on their feet, they're going to help us defeat this army, or at the very least, if we stabilize them, they won't die, and then they'll owe us a favor. And what the whole point is that you can make the encounter very dangerous. Hordes of creatures come in at the wall, so that the party does have to have really high stakes, but it may not result in a TPK because there are other NPCs that can help prevent total destruction. Because if you're a PC and you go down the battlefield, the invading army doesn't necessarily have a reason to try to cut your throat in that moment. You know what I mean? Because their objective is to get inside the town, to invade the town. So they get one of their foes down. They're not going to take the extra time necessarily to coup de grace or whatever. You know, that guy's down. I don't care about him. My objective is to get to the wall and not die myself. So, you know, that's one way you can play that, to make it dangerous. But when the PCs do go down, doesn't necessarily mean the foes immediately kill them off, or, you know, they may not even be captured, because as long as the backups, maybe there's the bowmen, you know, the bowmen come up and they start pew 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 and getting all the guys, all the enemies down around them, and somebody can go out and pull them back in, or if they're on the wall itself, obviously somebody falls down there, medic, combat medic, you know, so you have other NPCs, other party members, they can save each other and still be part of this really big epic battle, that has high stakes, but won't necessarily result in TPK, even if the players lose the encounter. And so that's one of the reasons I actually enjoy doing those kind of big combats when there are lots of NPCs, because you can have high stakes, but that doesn't necessarily mean if a failure of the encounter occurs, the party's not going to die. Ideally. And in the troll invasion lizard man encounter that I ran, that wasn't really a danger. They actually did really well against the invading army. And as I said in another episode, that also allowed me to bring Harshnag in, because I had foreshadowed that. I had foreshadowed Harshnag as this hero. It was up in the north. It was this unique situation because it was a frost giant, and they had met the barbarian tribe, and the barbarians are like, oh yeah, you know, we tell the story about Harshnag, you know, the destroyer or whatever, but she's a good guy. In my campaign, it's a she. She's a good guy, and they have these stories, and they tell these, you know, barbarian sagas about Harshnag, and they treat her almost like a rock star, you know, to the barbarian. The barbarian is this frost giant who has turned good, is like this really, or at least to some of the barbarians, this is like it's kind of a celebrity. And so they're playing the invasion. The lizard men are coming in. The trolls are coming in. They're trying to fight that off. And here comes Harshnag tromping down the road and just beating the crap out of some of the invaders. And so that's how I introduced Harshnag to the party. I told them about them first. I foreshadowed Harshnag's entrance and then introduced them to Harshnag. And that worked out really well. We're about 40 minutes in. So let's see if I can wrap up these last couple topics pretty quickly. On the same lines, Felgalos, who's the dragon that occurs later in the adventure. There is a random encounter with a metallic dragon in the random encounter table where they can talk to the metallic dragon. The metallic dragon's like, oh yeah, I saw some hill giants over that way or whatever. But you can use that dragon to give a little bit of clue to the players if you want to do that random encounter. And so I wanted to, because the Felglos subplot is kind of out of left field. It's another one of those NPCs that kind of comes in and then never see him again, which again, I've complained about in previous videos that Storm King's Thunder is terrible about having these throwaway NPCs. Well, I don't know why they didn't think to do this in the book itself, but that metallic dragon could be Felglos. So that's what I did. He's a different name in my game because I didn't, I changed a lot of the names and the serial numbers to scratch them off. So anybody who knows Forgotten Realms canon doesn't necessarily recognize the named NPCs for ones that may be more famous. And Felglos is somewhat known if people know about the dragons. But the point is that I introduced the dragon to them. They were going over that big stone bridge that goes over the river, where it's just this it's like 400 feet in the air, no guardrails, whatever. And there's the dragon just sitting up there hanging out, and they're like, oh crap, what are we going to do? Well, he's a metallic dragon. Maybe he's good. Maybe we can talk to him. So yeah, they talk to the dragon. So I've introduced them. I've introduced the dragon. I'm going to bring the dragon back in a couple different places so they get to know the dragon, the Felglos character, so that when later, if they happen to do the other subplot with the giants that involves Felglos, and they may not, I don't know if I'm going to run that or not. I'm going to let them decide if, what giants they're going after and whatnot. So they may never see him in that scene or not. But if they do, they'll have a connection to him already. And that's the whole point, is I'm trying to foreshadow all these important NPCs, give them a bigger role in the campaign than they do in the book, so that the players can meet them more than once. And then later they have a reason to, beyond just being like, well, we're good guys, and so we're going to do the right thing. They have a true, oh man, that guy's my friend. I got to help save him. I want to do that with a lot of the NPCs. That NPC is my friend. I'm just not just a hero that helps save people, but I want to save that person because they're important to me as a player character. So the last topic before I wrap up here. As I said in one of the previous episodes, I've kind of let my players wander freely and attack the plot in the order that they would like. So they haven't actually gone to the Eye of the Allfather. They don't know what's up with the giants. They got a few clues about what's going on, but they don't know all the backstory yet. And they don't know that they need to retrieve the conch from one of the giant lords. So they've started to assault Grudd Haug at this point. And one of the mistakes, maybe, I don't know if mistake is the right word, but one of the things that has occurred to me is, well, and it also, a player made a specific comment about this. They know the giants are creating a ruckus. They know the giants are a nuisance, and that there's a bounty for giant heads. I made it so they didn't have to cart the heads around. I said, yeah, if you take, has to be the left ear or whatever. I said, if you have proof that you killed a giant, you don't have to carry the whole head. You can just bring a body part, but it has to be a specific body part. So that way you're not trying to kill one giant and cut them up into small pieces and say, hey, I killed 10 giants. No. But anyways, they're starting to assault Grudd Haug. And because they know that that's the source of most of the hill giant issues. and they've gone in, they've killed a few giants, and they retreated, and they got away. I don't know if I was a little too easy on them. Again, I'm not trying to play nice with them. If they get in over their heads, they could die. But they put out so much damage when they coordinate their attacks. They'll do 100 points of damage in a round if they roll well. I mean, easily. If most of the party hits, and the rogue is getting his sneak attack because he gets it if somebody in melee with the opponent, and the ranger has colossal slayer, and the paladin divine smite, and blah blah blah. But if they all really tag team on a big dude, they can do over 100 points of damage in a single round now at 6th level, I think. So yeah, they're pretty hardcore at this point. So they ran into Grudd Haug, and I'm just trying to ease them into it. They snuck in the back cave where some of the giants are sleeping, and they faced just one at first, and yeah, like it was dead immediately, like so quickly that I was like, that combat would barely have even been heard by anybody who wasn't listening for it, because yeah, they murderized him. And then they went and found the Etten. They didn't go all the way into the pig cave, but I had the Etten in another part of the cave because of the time of day and whatnot. But anyways, they attacked the next group, and they did make enough noise to then start attracting attention. So I started bringing in enemies in waves. I didn't want to just throw everything at them. I was like, okay, like 2 rounds later, these guys are going to arrive. And then the next round, these guys are going to arrive. And I started doing small waves. And the whole idea is that, again, I'm just trying to ratchet up tension. It's like, okay, we can handle this. We can handle this. We can handle this. So orcs, and then the bugbears, and then, like just more and more and more and more. And then all of a sudden, okay, now giants are coming in, that danger level is going up and up and up and up and up. But they had some very, very smart play. Because I thought they had gotten in over their head, and they were very smart about it. And, they used rope trick as a temporary hiding space. And it was a good idea, and it was something the giants wouldn't expect. So yeah, they got in. They were able to get inside undetected before the giants all ran in and were like, oh, where'd they go? Oh, they're invisible or whatever. And so the giants started running around looking for them while they were hiding in their little extra dimensional space. So they played really smart. So then, I thought about what the giants were going to do in that hour that the characters were hiding. Because now the characters have disappeared. The giants think maybe they went invisible and whatever. We're going to send out searches and stuff like that. And they got out of the hiding spot. They headed towards the exit. I had one group that was guarding the exit out because they weren't sure if the players were inside or outside. So I did have a group. I had a giant, a bunch of other dudes under minions. They slaughtered them. I mean, they like decimated them really quickly too, because they were ready. They went in, they said, this is what we're going to do. These are the spells we're going to cast. And then the same thing on the way out. They're like, okay, this is what we're going to do. These are the spells we're going to cast. We're going to run in there, slaughter, run out. And they did. They ran out and had them get chased and stuff like that. But they got away. I set up what the conditions were for them to escape. And they escaped. So now they've killed a few of the giants. They've killed a lot of the minions. Grudd Haug is weaker, and they're going to go back and assault it again. But the question then came up, and this is another learning lesson for the DMs, because this is something that I maybe didn't do right, because they haven't gone to the Eye of the Allfather. The question came up is, what's our objective? What is the victory condition in assaulting this giant lair? Do we have to kill everything? I mean, and they're discussing amongst themselves. I haven't thrown out anything to push them in one direction or another yet. Because they did this before going to the Allfather. They know the giants are causing problems. They don't know why. They know that there's bounty on the giant heads. But they're like, they still have several more giants to face, and ogres and some other things. So they're beginning to question. They've spent a couple sessions doing the invasion and getting out, and now they're like, okay, what's our end game? What's our goal out of this? Or does everything have to be dead? And they're discussing, or does it just have to be Goo? Now I know as the dungeon master that if they kill Goo or they incapacitate her or do something to disrupt her, that some of the other giants are gonna be like, all right, screw this, I'm out of here. You know, that if they break up enough, they create enough tension within the compound and create problems for Goo, that some of the Goo's allies might be like, you know what, this isn't worth it. We're going to abandon ship. I haven't decided what that level is, where that number is yet. And I've even beefed up some of the numbers that are in the hideout, added more bugbears, added a few more orcs because of their current combat abilities. So the learning lesson in here is I haven't given them a clear motive for this hideout. And maybe that's okay. Maybe that's not necessarily my job, because I've let them play this adventure as a sandbox, that they need to decide what their motivation is somewhat. And is it just, you know what, we're heroes and the hill giants are bad and we're going to kill them, or we're going to collect the bounty, or maybe we just need to do enough damage to slow them down and then go back to town and be like, hey, we found Grudd Haug. Who else wants to be in on this slaughter with us? And maybe they raise an army, or whatever, mercenaries, whatnot. So I'm just kind of letting it stew for the moment. I'm not taking any active. I'm not pushing them. I'm not trying to guide them in what their motivation is. I'm trying to let them decide for themselves at what point is the victory condition. But it is something to consider, that the danger that poses is that they might be like, you know, we did enough damage, we'll move on. And maybe that's okay. Maybe they don't have to kill Goo. Again, they don't know about the conchs yet. So anyway, it's just something I'm struggling with mentally, wrestling. Do I add some other motivation into their assaults of Grudd Haug? And at the moment, I'm staying away from it. I'm saying, no, I'm going to let them decide why they want to do this. Because I've given a few hooks, you know. I mean, clearly the communities are like, we got to stop the giants. They're taking all our stuff and they're beating up people. They're eating everything. And that may be enough for now. But, you know, I do think about it. Like, have I given them enough? Have I given them enough motivation to make this encounter interesting enough for them? So you might be going through the same thing. Well, although if your characters went to the Eye of the Allfather, they know what their goal is. They know it's to get the MacGuffin. But this is something to think about if your characters start following the leads without going to the Eye of the Allfather. In Golden Fields, they can start searching for Grudd Haug. In Tribor, they could follow the fire giants. They could start, if the fire giants are walking away from Tribor, if they didn't kill them, it won't be hard to track those fire giants and figure out what's going on, and maybe they do catch up with them and kill them later, or they interrogate them. Or the point is that if you give your players that level of freedom, which I'm trying to do, they could very easily do a lot of the adventure without ever going to the Eye, and then they can go to the Eye later Harshnag takes them to the eye later, being like, "Hey, you need to talk to this this oracle. There's other stuff going on that you need to know about, or whatever." But they may be just motivated to kill giants because the giants are causing a ruckus. In which case, they don't need the Eye of the Allfather to go tell them to kill giants. They're gonna do it on their own. So just keep that in mind that they may, when the going gets tough, they may question their own motivation. They might be like, this might be harder to do than we thought it would. Maybe we should come back later. How you handle it? Well, honestly, I don't know because I'm still working through that myself. All right, so that's been close to an hour. I should probably wrap this up. Oh, the other thing that's kind of cool, I've talked about in the previous episode as a final note about terrain and other things to make the tabletop stand out a little bit. And it's been a few weeks. I do the battle map. I do play on the grid. I'm not always theater of the mind. I do parts of it theater of the mind where the battle grid would be too much of a challenge due to space, distance, size. But I do like playing on the grid, and I do like to present cool stuff with terrain and whatever set decoration, so to speak, I can put out there to make a scene look cool. And so I've been going to run Kraken's Gamble at some point. So I have some of the Dwarven Forge sewer pieces, which you may be familiar with. They're little, but I don't have a lot because Dwarven Forge is expensive. But I am lucky enough that I did purchase a 3D printer a little while ago. Unfortunately, right now it's a little bit on the fritz. But one of my players actually also purchased a 3D printer because they're really into that part of the hobby as well. And so I printed up some pieces, some sewer pieces, and then he's printing up some stuff for me too. I said, "Hey, I need some sewer pieces." Didn't tell him why, but I'm sure he'll figure it out. But I said, "Will you print me up some stuff?" So he's printing up stuff, and I printed up something, and I started to paint it a little bit so I can do the sewer layout with with Dwarven Forge and the stuff that I've 3D printed and whatnot, and do something really nice, build a really nice board for that particular encounter when it comes. I'm running out of time though. I think it's going to be coming up in just a few weeks, and I've got a lot of painting to do. Like I said, I started to paint some of the pieces and got a whole bunch of other just flat gray pieces that I've got to paint up, or black. This one started out as a black piece. So, yeah. Don't know when I'm going to be doing the next video because I got to do a lot of painting and stuff to set up that encounter. And you don't have to go to that level. I just thought it's kind of cool. I have another piece. This is like a little sewer piece that has like a walkover grate on it, which I thought was really cool. And I think that map in Kraken's Gamble has a couple of those. So got some of those printed up too. And they'll look really nice next to my sewer sluice with a little grate. Like the players can walk across. And anyway, I don't need to talk about that. You don't need, but it's just fun stuff. Try to think of cool things that you can put out on your table for your players because they'll love it. So that was episode 7. Humor, mass combat, foreshadowing. I think that's all my topics for tonight. So have a good day and keep watching. This is Raging Owlbear. The website is ragingowlbear.blogspot.com, also known as Marty Walzer on social media. So check me out. I'm on the Facebook groups and the Google pluses and the Twitters. Say hey, and give me a like, give me a subscribe, help me out, help me build some audience, because the man's got to eat. Yeah, this doesn't pay for jack. I get no money out of this kind of stuff. It's just for fun, but I want people to watch because somebody's got to get something out of this. Anyways, good night. See you. Have fun. Maybe next week we'll talk again. Bye-bye.